6:36, 24 minutes moving up to 7 o'clock. This is First Up on CTV as we continue our exploration of the possibilities regarding the march later on today at Woodford Square. We have on set with us now Attorney at Law Robin Montano. Good morning, Mr. Montano.
Morning, Paul.
Thank you for joining us. Let's go back with you, Mr. Foote, some of the conversation with Mr. Giuseppe to the issue of the motion of censure and no confidence. Let's start with that regarding
let's start in another way. Let's start by going back to the very beginning of this Section 34 law. Is or was Section 34 good law? The short answer to that is yes. Forget about whether Ish and Steve and everything else. What was Section 34 about? Section 34 was basically saying that if a person had been charged and his case was there and he hadn't, the case had not come to fruition, after 10 years, then the case should be thrown out. That was what Section 34 was about. Now you talk to any lawyer, and I'm not a criminal lawyer, but I have criminal lawyer friends. And even so, as a lawyer, I can understand the logic of that. I understand that there are several hundred, if not several thousand cases that are more than 10 years old. Clear them off the books. If
justice delayed is justice denied.
That's the point. So Section 34 of itself was a good concept and a good law. And the evidence for that statement that I'm making is the fact that the entire Parliament, not just the lower house, not just the upper house, but both houses of Parliament voted unanimously on Section 34, amongst other things. There were some queries about it. Mr. Imbert raised some queries downstairs in the lower house when it came back from the Senate and so on. But the short point is that everybody signed off on this. Now, we don't make law to suit individuals. We make law to suit the society as a whole. So now that we are satisfied that Section 34 was good law, let's move on to the next stage. What happened? Well, here is where it gets murky. According to the Prime Minister, and we must take her word for it, and because there's absolutely no evidence to the contrary, what happened was that the Minister of Justice came along, and he came to Cabinet, and he said, listen, I want to clear up what is going on with all the, what we can call the Section 34 cases, all several thousand of them. And I want to proclaim this part of the act that we've passed. Now, the act that was passed, dealing with the criminal justice system, had to, in order for it to be proclaimed, a lot of things had to be done. Things had to be put in place before it could be proclaimed, and those things, to my belief, have not even up to today yet been done. But the Minister of Justice's argument, Mr. Varney, his argument was, and it made sense, look, there's no point in delaying, excuse me, there's no point in delaying the proclamation of Section 34 while we wait for these other things, and we can go ahead with this. Now, the Prime Minister says that when he came to Parliament, the Cabinet, with the note asking for this to be done, the logical questions were asked, which were, has the Director of Public Prosecution signed off on this? Mr. Volney answered, yes. Has the Chief Justice signed off on it? In other words, the two most important stakeholders, have they signed off on it? Yes, everybody who has an interest in this has signed off on this.
Turned out to be wrong.
Turned out to be not true. Let's not use violent language. Let's just say it turned out not to be true. Now, excuse me, let me just take a drink here. Now, if I was in Cabinet, Paul, if you were in Cabinet and your Cabinet colleague comes along and tells you that, you are going to accept his word.
There's obviously the presumption that what you bring to Cabinet because of the seriousness of it is true.
That's correct. So everybody now signs off on it and it goes forward. Now here's where we get into some trouble. One, it turns out not to be true. Two, at the same time, Mr. Volney is spotted in Tobago. He takes his entire ministry over to Tobago, to the hotel of a very prominent
individual,
accused person who is going to benefit from Section 34. And he is seen in the company of this person having a drink. Whether he says it's Perrier water, the newspapers say it's champagne. I couldn't care less. The fact is he's seen and he admits to having a drink with this person. Now, that has to raise very ugly and most unnecessary suspicions.
It's not against the law, but it certainly does not look
listen to my words. It raises ugly and unnecessary suspicions. Now, and we can't go further than that. Now, let's meanwhile back at the ranch. So all this goes on. When the mud hits the fan, everybody says, oh, good grief, what the heck is going on? And the Prime Minister now and the Attorney General and the whole Cabinet, they say, you know what, let's just repeal Section 34, which in my view was a pity because it was a knee-jerk reaction, but it doesn't matter. Investigation is done and the Prime Minister fires Mr. Volney. Now, you go on to stage 2, which is the opposition says, hold it, Sheriff, she's heading for the strawberry patch. You got to fire the Attorney General too because he is responsible. He is the ultimate authority and so on. The Constitution puts him in charge of all legal affairs in the country. Well, that is almost but not quite true. Section 75 of the Constitution, and I'm going to use my words, but anybody out there wants to check it, go ahead and check it. You'll get the exact wording. Section 75 of the Constitution says, subject to Section 79, the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago has responsibility for all legal affairs in this republic. Right. Subject to Section 79. Now, that means that depending on what Section 79 says, the Attorney General is responsible. What does Section 79 say? Again, I'm using my words, okay? Section 79 of the Constitution says that the President, acting on the written advice of the Prime Minister, can assign any responsibility to any cabinet minister. So, in other words, the Prime Minister, writing to the President, can say, I want to appoint John Kwaku as the Minister of Justice, and he is going to have the following responsibilities. 1, 2, 3, 4. In other words, she can strip the Attorney General
of those particular responsibilities.
Of practically all.
Which has been done.
Which was done. So, the Attorney General, therefore, does not have the responsibilities that the Minister of Justice has. That has been taken out of his hands. You see, I would agree with the persons who were saying that Mr. Ramlogan should resign if it weren't for this. Also, when I first heard it, I thought, well, no, the Attorney General should be responsible. But then when I'm a lawyer, so I go and look it up. And when I look it up, I say, hold it, Sheriff.
According to the Constitution of the country, and according to what has happened before, vis-a-vis the Prime Minister appointing Minister Volney at that time, the Justice Minister, with these responsibilities, that
is the point. So, but it's just like this. Mr. Volney did not report to Mr. Ramlogan. He reported directly to the Cabinet. There were two separate ministries. If Mr. Volney was reporting under Mr. Ramlogan and reporting up so, I would agree.
But the ultimate responsibility would have
stood ultimate responsibility is with Mr. Ramlogan, and I would be the first to say, no, Ramlogan should go too. But Volney did not report to Ramlogan.
If you can clearly articulate that and understand the provisions of the Constitution, vis-a-vis this situation? You've clearly articulated it, and I'm not a constitutional expert. So
no, but no, follow the logic. Follow the logic.
So then on what basis then is the question, the obvious question, are the calls for Senator Ramlogan's removal? That's obvious, the next question.
You have to understand something. This is politics. Hey, if I was in opposition, you think I would be raising this point? I'd be ignoring it altogether, and I'd be coming, Ramlogan must go, and I'd be banging the table, Ramlogan must go.
So basically you're saying it's politics?
Of course, it's straight politics. And the opposition has hooked on to this. And they say, ah boy, this thing is resonating in the society. And why is it resonating in the society? It's resonating in the society because nobody has sat down and looked at the law, and nobody has sat down and looked at the facts. And what they are doing is that they're going round and round in circles and saying, yeah, the Attorney General should resign. But if he was responsible, the short answer is, of course. And I would be joining in the call, say, no, Ramlogan must go.
So based on what you've said, the fiasco surrounding Section 34 has already been adequately and comprehensively dealt with the firing of Minister Volney.
Unless the Prime Minister didn't tell us the truth. But there is no evidence, no evidence whatsoever that the Prime Minister has not told us the truth. Indeed, when a Prime Minister speaks the way this present Prime Minister spoke, when she speaks like that, unless there is something coming up, we must accept what she has said as being the truth.
Now, you're obviously speaking because of your training as an attorney, and the country has not in mass benefited from that training. So very often, we, the lay people, get caught between political talk and what is a matter of fact.
Right, but what you need to do now is you need to look and see what's going on. What's going on is this. The unions, led by OWTU, they have an agenda. And their agenda is to remove the government. That is clear, and that is simple, and you know what? That's their democratic right. I have no quarrel with them wanting to get the government out. My quarrel with them is the basic and fundamental fraud or dishonesty in the arguments. You see, my attitude is this. If you're going to come at me, and I don't mean me personally, if you're going
the government.
Yes, if you're going to come at me, then come at me on something that is of a substantial nature.
With supporting evidence.
With supporting evidence. But when you're coming, oh, Section 34 and so on, and there was this early proclamation. Well, if Mr. Volney had been telling the truth, then the fact of the matter is that the early proclamation made sense. Section 34 makes sense.
Especially if he had the sign-on, as he indicated, he wrote inaccurately, of the DPP and the Chief Justice.
If the DPP had said to Minister Volney, dear Minister of Justice, I agree, our office is inundated with these several thousand 10-plus-year-old cases, and I agree, this would get rid of everything. And then the Chief Justice had also written and said, dear Minister Volney, I also agree. I understand that the whole act can't be promulgated right now, and we're not going to proclaim it and so on. But you see, this makes sense for the administration of justice and all the rest of it. Go ahead. Then that would be it. But what happened was Minister Volney did not tell the truth, and he misled the cabinet. Now, Mr. Volney may very well, and I shouldn't say may very well, I should say Minister Volney might be guilty of misfeasance in public office. There might be something there, but that's another issue.
With that said now, and you've clearly articulated logically that one of the main premises in the early days for this march for the removal of Senator Ramlogan, and by extension Mr. Warner, which we've been calling for a while, as you said, as people say, have no basis. The march, obviously, from what you're saying, if you're following your logic, is politically motivated.
Of course it is.
Let's talk about the ramifications for that, and the ramifications for unions and individuals like Joseph Remy saying, well, we're not joining with the PNM, we're joining with a march against bad governance.
Well, fine, you're joining in for a march against bad governance. That's your democratic right. But are you premising, and I'm asking the question open-ended, not nothing. Are you premising this so-called bad governance on Section 34, or are you premising it on other things? If so, what are the other things?
And by extension, what are the evidence to support it?
Yeah, and what is the evidence to support it? I don't mind, but just come and tell me exactly. When you say bad governance, what exactly? What exactly are you complaining about? Because as a logical and reasonable and rational person, I want to know what I am being asked to support or not support, as the case may be. Come with the evidence.
In an environment which is highly politicized in Trinidad and Tobago, with an opposition that some may say their job is to get back in government, which this is what the opposition tries to do. How should the public respond to these situations? Many people say, well, sometimes you don't need evidence because it's not a matter of the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law and principles rather than letter of the law issues.
But I agree. However, you see, understand this. In England, which is where we get our Westminster system from, the opposition is referred to as Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition. I'm sort of sad that we don't use that terminology down here, and I'll tell you why. It is in the interests of every citizen of this country, every single citizen, that the government of the day, regardless of which side of the political fence you come on, it is in our interest that the government succeeds. The opposition is there to do several things. First of all, it is there to provide an alternative. Secondly, it is there to keep the government of the day on its toes. The government steps out of line.
Check and balance.
Yes, it's a check and it's a balance. And the government, the opposition has a duty, which is higher than a responsibility, has a duty to come to the country and say, hold it, Sheriff, they are heading for the strawberry. They're not heading, they're in the strawberry patch. Look at this, that, and the other. In these circumstances, I would have a lot more respect for the present opposition if they could and would come with solutions to the various problems that are facing us. Now, what is facing us? At the end of the day, it's all about, as Bill Clinton said, it's the economy, stupid. But you know what? We're not all stupid. But it is about the economy. We need to be able to deal with things. We need to be able to see what's going on. But we have another problem. In this country, people tend to be less than honest in their opposition to anybody or anything. For example, we now have a media, generally speaking, that is anti-government, especially the print media. Why they're anti-government, I personally don't quite understand.
But is it anti the People's Partnership or anti-government generally?
No,
because Patrick Manning was vociferously opposed.
That is true, and this is what has me personally confused. Look, let's look, for example, at the Express. I don't understand them. And I mean that genuinely. And if any Express editor is listening, perhaps he or she can write an editorial on this and explain their position. Let me point out to you. Within recent times, 2-3 months ago, I'm always bad with time. I can never remember exactly when something happens. The Express printed an article prominently. Attorney General buys two multi-million-dollar apartments shortly within 2-3 months after he becomes Attorney General. Now, the intent, the innuendo and inference in that article was that the Attorney General, from the word go, had been involved in some hanky-panky. It ignored the fact that lawyers very often get paid late. It ignored the fact that he was a very successful attorney, and it just said, look at this.
So you think the intent was to suggest some malfeasance?
Well, most certainly, when I read the headlines and I saw this, That's what I thought. I thought that they were suggesting some hanky-panky. The article was cleverly written and did not, you know, it skirted. Then, just recently, a week or 2 or 3 ago, headlines, front page, Carlos John, one of the individuals who is supposedly benefiting from Section 34, buys a car, PCS 34, for his daughter. Buys a Mercedes-Benz and so on, because he so loves the number 34.
But on the other hand, there are some media houses who are obviously pro-government.
Hold on, I'm going to come to that. Now, again, when you see this, the inference there is that Carlos John was doing this, except when you read the article, you realize that the car was bought more than a year ago. So
once again, suggestion in
so why are you putting that on your front page? You know, comment is free, but facts are sacred. And I can present facts in all kinds of ways to twist it. So why are you twisting it like that?
Well, to end, I can suggest that just as the government must be held accountable and the opposition, so too must the media.
Couldn't agree with you more. And at least be honest. If you are, my complaint against the media is not that they don't have the right to do that, you know.
But come out and say.
My complaint is, oh crikey, if you're against, then stand up and say, look, we are against and we're going to do like this.
Mr. Montano, thanks for being with us today. We've been talking to Robin Montano.